Celinne, welcome to the show. How's everything with yourself?
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited for today. I've been looking forward to this.
Dude, after we met for a coffee and the amount of energy that got thrown around just within that hour of meeting you, I was just like, look, this show is just going to be absolute electric. So I cannot wait for this.
Yes. And now we can explode it everywhere.
Well, this is the fun thing because like the more I research you and obviously the more that I get to know you, I kind of feel very similar to you, where you've done quite a lot of things to such a high standard, XYZ, where you're quite multifaceted above the board, especially when it comes into business and personal development. Now, there's quite a lot I want to go in with this conversation. And firstly, really, before I kind of like really go into niching this conversation down, I always think it's really beneficial because obviously this is your first time on the show. Our listeners are very new to you. And obviously we want to get as much of you and your story and how you've got to where you are and how you've done the amazing things that you've done. I'd love to first just start off with just getting your story on here. So Celinne, the person who you are today and the things that you've done is absolutely incredible. And obviously from me meeting you, I can see where your future's going, which excites me even more. But I always know with people who have built incredible things, who have done incredible things on a personal aspect, it always has to start from some form of story. So Celinne, tell us a little bit about yourself. How have you gone from where you are to who you are, and what happened in between that kind of gave you the trajectory to what you've done?
Yes, of course. Let's dive right into that. So it starts with an observation, which is that one of the things that most surprises people about me when they meet me is that I am not American. And that's a big one and has everything to do with the story I'm about to tell you. Because I actually am originally from Italy. I'm Italian Brazilian, and I immigrated to the US when I was 10 years old. And that really set the scene for the entire story that I'm going to tell you, and who I am today really shaped me so profoundly. Because imagine this. I was this little Italian girl frolicking in the streets of Rome, which is one of the most freaking epic cities on the planet. And then I get randomly, unexpectedly implanted into this northeast suburban Connecticut, freezing cold, snowing place. And I don't speak a lick of English, and I don't know what the hell's going on. What is this culture? Where am I here? And from there is where
So your native tongue isn't actually English?
What?
Your native tongue's actually Italian, correct?
Italian and Portuguese.
Wow. I would never have called that. There's no tonality or like Italian ring out. That's incredible.
Yeah, I was very determined to learn English, as you can hear. But yeah, English is actually my third language. And so I remember when we first moved to the US and, the whole like American dream thing, I feel like even if maybe if you grew up in the US, you kind of know about it, but as an immigrant coming into the US, you know about it. And there's a whole narrative, a whole, speaking of stories, there's a whole cultural, societal narrative around if you immigrate into this country, you better make a name for yourself. Like you better prove yourself. And I definitely felt that pressure almost right away when I landed. And like I said, I didn't speak English, and I had to essentially, from day one, I was taught that you need to perform. And that pressure was coming from the system in the US. It was also coming from my family and my parents, like, oh my God, you're in the US now, my family in Brazil would say, you're so privileged. Like, I really hope that you like make something of yourself being here and having this amazing opportunity. And so the mold, the container that I grew up in was very much this one, like, girl, you better perform, get your act straight, and really like live into that American dream, or you are a failure. And that American dream, for those who maybe are less familiar with it, I mean, of course it varies, but it's that cookie cutter, like you need to work really, really hard. You need to bust ass and you can achieve anything. Basically the goal here, and I lived in the picture perfect suburban neighborhood of like, the goal here is to live in that white picket fence house with like 2.5 kids, and then you drive them to like soccer school, and then you travel 2 weeks out of the year. And then, maybe sometime you retire and then you actually like get time off. And so I had this whole mind of like, I need to do this. I need to achieve this. I need to accomplish this. So I went off to very quickly become a super overachiever, which is getting all the best grades, learning English really fast, really well, and just making sure that I was checking off all the boxes. And on top of that, because I know we're going to be talking about patterns and going a little deeper, on top of that, I was dealing with living in a household with an abusive narcissistic parent, dealing with a stepfather who eventually walked out on us and left us basically with no money, in a really terrible situation. And having that happen when I was 14, just a few years in the US, created that extra layer of pressure, because now it's not just, I need to achieve the American dream, but now it's like, I have to get out of here or I will be living in a low income household in really terrible conditions until I don't know when. So I need to get out.
So you effectively were forced to grow up very quick.
Extremely quickly. By the age of 14, I was going to school full time and I was working 30 plus hours a week, which for a 14-year-old, maybe, for us now, it's not that much, but for a 14-year-old, also balancing out, school and extracurricular activities, it was a lot. And so my memories of a child is just growing up very quickly and feeling this overbearing pressure of I need to make something of myself and get the fuck out of here. And that was just like my program for basically all through college. And so I did. I worked really hard, got the grades. I got a full ride to one of the best universities in the US. And from there, I'm like, awesome. I'm not in that neighborhood, in that suburb anymore. I've escaped living under the roof of my parent. And, now like my dad's not here, my stepdad's not here, like I'm out. But then I wasn't out because I still was financially dependent in some ways. I was still studying. I was still trying to get through college. And so I still had this feeling of I need to get through college and do the best possible job that I can. And then I need to get out. And so I went to college, got the grades, did the extracurricular activities, and graduated. And now I'm like, okay, I'm out of college. And what do I have to do? Well, I have to go to New York, even though I hate the city. I have to go to New York. I don't have a choice because 60% of people who graduate from my university go to New York. Therefore, New York is where I need to go. And I was in the advertising industry. And therefore I was like, well, there's only 5 places in the world that are top hubs. And I'm not going to London. So New York is where I can afford to go. That's where I'm going. So all these decisions throughout my life were just being made from this place of panic and fear. And how can I check off this box of who I'm supposed to be?
Can I ask you a question on this? Something about this correlates quite well to my own story with like the pressure and XYZ. Was there quite a bit of anxiety that trailed, be it mild or quite a lot, that kind of trailed you through that journey?
100%. I struggled with depression since I was 14 years old. I would just go into in and out of just really deep bouts of depression, anxiety. I was hospitalized for an anxiety attack once because it got so strong. So depression and anxiety were definitely key emotions that I was feeling all the way through. And it only got worse when I got to New York City. So I did all the things I was supposed to do. And I got the sexy strategist job in one of the top agencies in the country. It was voted that, and that's why I needed to work here. And so I start my corporate life in New York City. And all of a sudden I have this, again, it's an illusion. I'm like, oh, things are coming together, right? Even though I'm living in a tiny apartment and spending like 60% of my income paying the rent and, having to like pinch pennies for everything. And I'm showing up to work and I'm working 10 to 12 hour days. And then, I'm kind of have time to do stuff, but not really because my whole life is work. But this is okay, right? Because this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Like I'm successful. I'm in corporate. Like I made it. This is the American dream. And just running on this hamster wheel, continuing, it didn't feel right. And then continuing to convince myself like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
It's like everything externally validates it, but internally it's like, nah.
It checked out. The story checked out. But inside, I was just dying. And, 3 years go by And basically, you know, I call it when the universe really wants you to push you in a direction, it will nudge you. If you ignore it, it will push you. If you ignore it, it will just shove you into the abyss.
Yeah.
It's like, let's
like
say I ignored the signs. And then long story short, over the course of 4 months, I went on a volunteer trip to Cambodia where it was absolutely heartbreaking. I was working like in the slums of Cambodia, really seeing the way I had traveled so much before, but it was the worst conditioned place I've ever been in. It was really in the slums, and really seeing the way that the other part of the world lived, feeling like I don't have a purpose. Like every day I'm showing up to work and I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm just selling stuff to people that I don't care about. Like, not that I don't care about the people, I don't care about the things I'm selling. And then my grandfather, who was really important to me, and it was a man who always lived his life with purpose and meaning, he died. And then I thought I was a shoo-in for this promotion that would allow me to basically not be paying 60% of my rent using my paycheck. I didn't get the promotion, didn't get the raise. And then my then boyfriend broke up with me on my 25th birthday. And then my rent skyrocketed by $700, which I couldn't afford because I didn't get the promotion. This all happened in a 4-month window. And I was just like, fuck this. I can't do this anymore. And I just hit this point right in the middle. It was ironic because I hit this before right after Cambodia, my grandfather died, but before the promotion. It was almost like I made the decision and then the universe responded by throwing more shit at me. And I decided there was one moment where I'm like, I have to change my life. I have to, because if I keep going this way, I'm going to die. I'm just going to die. I'm going to wilt away. I don't feel anything. My emotions are just dried up. And the only way out is to drastically change everything I know.
I'd love to speak to you about this. This wasn't on the cards for the topic today, but I think given the nature of what you do with CNS work and breath work, and obviously you do a lot of other things as well, a lot of people really numb out when they're living in that hamster wheel life. I know myself included. I was drinking wine all the time. You can do recreational drugs and all that sort of stuff. And you get very numb to the point where you actually do lose that track of feeling. I'd love to know from you with your own story, like, what was the moment that you started to kind of like regain? Obviously you were aware that things weren't right, but would you say there was a point when you started to change your life that you started to trust the feelings? You started to get that sense of feeling back and intuition?
Yes. So that question leads perfectly right into the next part of the story, which is everything started going wrong. And I made a decision. I'm like, I'm changing my life. I have to. Everything started going even worse. And just to be clear, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to like change my life and I have this plan and I'm going to like do this trip and I'm going to do this thing. Right. Then this is where the intuition part comes in, because I'm like, if I just decide this, I have a feeling that I'm going to find the answer, but not really listening to that, but kind of listening to that. And then things go wrong to the point where I'm like, I actually have no choice right now, but to trust that like this decision is right. Because the other option is for me to just be miserable. And that's not an option.
It's like you were given that much shit on your plate where your intuition was the only thing left to trust in.
There was nothing I could do other than follow my intuition, because it was that or be more depressed, be more upset, be more broke, be more all the things.
Do you not think that this is crazy? I've never really thought about this that much, but do you not think obviously we always say like when you're not listening to the signs, the universe will face plant you, quite literally. That's actually quite a remarkable thing to actually think of. I genuinely see from the people who we work with, shit keeps happening until they're stripped bare. And it's like, you only have one thing to listen to now. Like you can hit.
That's right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And the goal is to not get yourself to that point. It's the breakdown and the breakthrough, when it comes to like your hero's journey, it's really amazing because for me to have that, oh my God, I call it with my clients, I call it the fuck this shit moment. For me to have that moment, and I had it again a couple of years later, like it's so profound. But the idea when it comes to like emotional and personal mastery is that you can become so attuned to your intuition and the signs of the universe that you don't even have to get to that point where everything falls apart that hard, because you're just going to listen. When the clues are coming up, And sometimes you just have to fall that hard on your ass, but not always. And I truly believe that sometimes it's almost like we choose to fall that hard on our ass, obviously not consciously, so that we can really learn the lesson. But if you learn the lesson before that, if I was listening a few steps before that, there was already clues in those 3 years that were like, hey, you need to get out. And even the universe even gave me exit strategies. There was one time, 1 year after my first job, I remember I got laid off like randomly, and I got like paid like a month. So I had like a month off where I could have resolved and be like, oh, like, what are my alternatives? What can I do instead? But instead I was like, oh no, I was just freaking out about getting another job. And in that month, I actually ended up starting a blog and reconnecting to my passion of writing, which eventually led to so it all happened for a reason, and I'm not regretting any of it, but I'm saying like, I had to fall that hard on my ass.
Yeah. I get that. I totally get that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, this was September of 2015, and fast forward September 2015 and to June of 2016, which is when I got on a plane with a one-way ticket to Europe. In between that was me being like, oh, I guess I just have to apply to jobs in another country. Being like, nope, it's the same shit, different toilet. Oh, let me try another industry. This is me again. And this is while everything else was falling apart, by the way, which is why the universe kept bringing it down, be like, oh, like a different industry. Let me just go into tech. Nope. And then do it again. And then I hit a point where I'm like, I'm just going to just scrap all of this. Let's just put a big red marker on everything that I've been doing so far. And let me just go with my plan B, which was I'm going to travel the world. And being the so career obsessed and type A as I was like, well, this can't just be like me traveling the world like a random backpacker. I need to make this into a project. And so I decided to design a social experiment. And the social experiment was that I would circumnavigate the globe. So from New York all the way back to New York by couch surfing using human connection. So not using this website ever, but using human connection. Like, have you heard of 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon?
No, but I am super excited for this conversation. So please enlighten me on this.
It's a theory that it's like a pop theory based on Kevin Bacon. And I don't know where it came from specifically, but the theory is that we are connected to every single person on the planet by at least 6 degrees. So I wanted to test that. And I decided, okay, I'm going off into the world and I'm just going to travel. And I'm going to come back to New York when I come back. And I'm going to basically sleep in the homes of people I don't know or that are connected to me somehow and just see how that goes. I want to see, like, are people kind? Will people support me if I decide to start my life from scratch and design the life that I truly want? Will the universe give me the support I need? Are people good or are they bad? And just being like, and what happens if I just jump into this abyss? Will a net appear and catch me? This was me and my beef with the universe. It's like, it was the test. It was like, if I jump into this abyss, are you going to catch me if I trust you? And the answer was, yeah, big fucking yeah. And so I went off and I essentially started what ended up being a year-long journey where I started in Europe, went through Southeast Asia, which is how I encountered Bali for the first time, into Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, back California. Basically did a whole circumnavigation around the world where I used the power of my story, which was, listen, this is who I am. And my dream is to design a life that fulfills me, that I love. I need to find a new way to live. And I have no idea what I'm doing. If I jump, will you help me? And moving from home to home to home, most of them, I would say about 80% of them, complete strangers, people I never met before, friends of friends, my friend's cousin's sister, and so on and so forth. In over 20 countries, over 100 people hosted me. And everywhere I went, blank slate, I had a little carry-on. I did not have my fancy New York clothes, a little carry-on, traveling around the world. And the only thing I did was explore. It was travel, talk to people, and write. And those are the only 3 things I wanted to do because they were the only 3 things that lit something up in me. And I figured to myself, if I just do the 3 things I like every single day, something's bound to spark, something's bound to ignite again, right? And the answer was yes. And so in this year, I basically interviewed hundreds of people, asking them the same questions about love, about friendship, about their life. Do they like their life? Do they not like their life? And I sat at the feet of I don't know how many hours worth of people telling me stories. And I learned a lot from that year that shaped me profoundly as a person. But the big, fat key takeaway that became the foundation for the business I have today is everyone has a story to tell. And the story you tell yourself and others completely shapes your reality. And I found that to be true, whether you were a villager in Myanmar with nothing, or you were a wealthy businessman in a penthouse in Malaysia. It didn't matter what socioeconomic spectrum you were in, what was where you were from. The shit you were saying out loud about who you are as a person and what your story is or how bad you had it completely shaped how happy you were in the present. So
that's an absolutely incredible story. I feel like I'd be doing everyone an injustice if I didn't ask a couple of questions on this experience, which is, what was your, is there one key moment from traveling the world, being on lots of different people's couches, hearing lots of people's stories? Is there one profound moment, like your one key moment or story within that story? Is there one big thing that happened which was just amazing or incredible, or that you just took something absolutely profound away from?
Wow. Yeah. It's really interesting because I'm actually writing a book about this right now. So I'm 200 pages in. So when you were saying, I was running through my Rolodex of which story. And I think one that really lands for me, I have many stories as you can imagine, but one that landed in the moment you said that, which to me is the universe being that's the one you got to tell, girl, is when I was in Nepal, which is one of my favorite countries and one of the countries that profoundly changed me the most. And it was my last day in Nepal. And, at this point I had done a dynamic meditation retreat at a cult. It was weird, another story, but I had traveled the whole country, really gotten, I had traveled to Hindu countries before, but this was really the taste of that culture that in a way that I hadn't tasted before. And I remember going to, they took me to I cannot pronounce this for the life of me. It's Pashnuna temple. So yep. It's the most famous temple in Nepal. I cannot pronounce it. And super sacred temple. And I had a Nepali kind of guiding me, my friend guiding me and explaining to me what was happening. And this temple is split into two sides. There's the river, the Bagmati River, which actually goes back to, it trails back to Mother Ganges in India. So it's actually a very sacred river. And it splits the complex into two. On one side, you have the temples and stuff where people celebrate. So when you have celebrations and, in Hindu culture, there's so many freaking celebrations all the time, just beautiful. And so that's where they're always celebrating. And then on the other side is Christian. And there's all these bridges in between that bridges the two together. And so you go into the celebration side and it's lively and there's colors and it's happy. And then you move into the death side and the quality of the energy changes. And I remember just seeing a bunch of people in white and they're running, they're going and they're crying. And I'm what's going on? And I'm following them from a distance, trying to be respectful, but also what is going on? And it is a public space. And long story short, they were taking the body of their, whoever it was, an older person. And because I couldn't see because it was wrapped. And they were burning the body in the river. And so I actually went, and this was something that to me, now living in Bali, I'm just another Tuesday. But at the time, I'm I didn't know this was a thing, an option. Watching them do the ritual and crying and the sacred ritual and burning that body and just smelling the flesh, the burning flesh, and just seeing it and just staying through that whole process, which takes a couple hours, and just them even now I get chills, sweeping the ashes into the river and just the ritual, the sacredness of it, and just being on this bridge, because I remember I was on the bridge so I could see it, just being confronted with here's life, here's death, and I'm here right in the middle of it. And just being what do I choose moving forward? Because that death to me was a physical death. It was really visceral, but also was a death of to me personally, watching that, it was I'm dying. The person that I was once has to die. She just has to make space for this life. And I don't know how, but I have to figure it out. I just have to let this die. And I actually was not able, until I started the process of grieving and dying that old part of me, it wasn't able to create space for the new version of me that needed to emerge. And this is a process that isn't like a one-time thing. It's something I just went through again this year. And so that cycle of death and rebirth, and how we demonize death and we only look at life, but actually death creates birth and birth creates death, and just it's the cycle of it. And it just really struck me. So
look, this is an incredible topic. We've never really had this on the show. I really think this is a big thing because like what we're speaking about here is the death of an old identity. And at any given moment, and I love the wording that you used, it was choice. You chose. You like, the person I'm being right now and showing up for the world isn't going to get me where I want. So something has to change. And it means you've got to go through this like grieving process with yourself of letting go. It's like, you know what, for me to achieve this, to get what I actually want in the world, I've got to reignite the phoenix or re-evolve as this new person. And it's a hard process. And I always say to people, like, this is the same thing in personal development. It's the same thing in business. Every single day you can die and rebirth as something new. You have choice to wake up as somebody new. But the issue comes when you stay in the middle ground of trying to hold on to who you are and not trusting in fully who you can be. And you end up balancing in the middle. And this is the point when you really get stuck. And the thing that I really appreciate about this story is for you, it sounds like you were kind of in that mid ground of trying to find clarity of what to move towards, but at the same time, knowing that something had to let go. It sounds like for you, that story was the moment where you were like, no, you've got to go. I need to go this way.
Yeah. And it's the pain. It's the pain. You know, a lot of people, they look at, and this is part of why I'm even, writing my book. It started when I first was writing my book. It was like a little travelogue. And then I've been trying to write this thing for like 3 years and I couldn't, because I'm like, I don't want to just write about like all the cool places I've been and the couches I slept on. And like, yeah, it's a cool story, bro. But like what's really coming up. And one of the things I realized this year when I had a second meltdown, less than the first one, but about a year ago, because I realized I went on to build this entire business around helping entrepreneurs tell their stories, express themselves, reinvent themselves. And I literally built like the Bali life, like the laptop life, location independent, successful, financially independent, and then like really healthy and all these things and then I got invited to do like a TEDx talk, which was like on my dream board for 3 years. And all of a sudden I was confronted with like, I literally have everything I could thought I wanted and I still feel empty. What gives? Because the journey that didn't complete, when I finished my journey, that 1 year journey, I created the business that I loved, a life that I loved. Like I started to actually build externally what I wanted to do. But essentially, I was just bringing in my old patterns and bringing them, remolding them, and reinserting them back into the current life that I was building, which was just manifesting in a much more pleasant way than New York City. But that even like what people don't understand is that year was one of the most painful years of my life, because it was so confronting for me to actually see all the ways that I was still following myself. Wherever you go, there you are. And even as I built the business and started to really let some of those go, like I didn't allow a big piece of me to die, but carried on in my little satchel, carried on some really detrimental patterns that until three years after that, when I'm like hit this point where I'm like, I literally have everything I want. What's the problem? It's because that story needs to match on the inside as well. And I need to heal from the inside out. And that's when I really truly looked at my book and was like, oh, that's the story. That's the true lesson. It's the journey back to yourself. It's the journey back to rediscovering you, because no amount of money, no amount of success, no amount of me redesigning my life is going to give me what I was craving as a 25-year-old in New York City, as a teenager, until I learned to realize and really feel in my body that I'm worthy of having this.
This is remarkable. I absolutely love this story. It's super impressive. I always love these conversations where people go, spirituality and all this sort of stuff. And they look at it like it's a religion or a cult, and they kind of like push it like away. And like, look, really, when you really think of these practices, it's just self-awareness to bring yourself back home so that you can create your future. And I think everyone's got their own ways of doing it. And there's so many ways that I want to take this conversation with you. But first, let's just finish up this story of how traveling the world, circumnavigating it, couch surfing, having this death and rebirth of the identity, because now we're at the period where you were like, do you know what? This old version of myself must die. You must go. And now we found the version of you who you're now entrusting in to create the future. So how did everything evolve from this?
Yeah. So from there, it happened. It was very, and I know like some people are like the law of attraction. I don't believe in it. It's because it's 1 out of 12 laws of the universe, but that's another topic for another time. But it really was a magnetism. It really was like me stepping into, I'm going to choose a new life for myself, and it's going to be based on what I love. And then all of a sudden I remember like I was sharing every single day. I was sharing stories on Instagram, and my Instagram was growing really, really fast back in the day when the algorithm was screwing us all over. It was growing really fast. And I remember I was doing caption stories when like nobody was doing them, because I remember people being like, why do you write so much on your Instagram? And I'm like, because I want to. I don't want to have my Tumblr. And so I remember like writing it, and all of a sudden boards of tourism started contacting me, being interested in spot and being one of my hosts. And then some brands started contacting me, and entrepreneurs being like, hey, how are you doing this? How are you like telling your story and attracting all these opportunities? And from there, very organically, I started to consult with entrepreneurs who were stuck in their business, and they had the business part down, but they weren't really sure how to brand themselves. What was the brand story? How can they actually be magnetic to their audience and speak their truth while also selling their product? And I was like, well, duh, like, here we go. And then, because I had a background in advertising and marketing and branding. And so to me, it was super natural for me to help someone sell something using the power of story, which is where I was at in that moment. And so I did that, and my business it scaled so fast. In less than a year, it was already a 6-figure business. I started helping really high profile programs, entrepreneurs almost right away. One of them being actually the founder of JetBlue. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that company. It's yep. $1 billion company. And even like being like, whoa, I can help people of this level. What's going on? And then fast forwarding through me building a business, and as you know, like getting recognized in a lot of places. And my story just was like, it was like bees to honey. Like people were coming to me because of my story, asking me, can you speak on my podcast? Can I feature you in the media? I was writing for Forbes. They asked me to document my entire journey on Forbes. I still write for them to this day. And just seeing like they were just coming to me. I'm like, okay. And riding that wave up until that time, about a year ago, when I really had this moment of like, okay, I feel like I've built, I mean, obviously I'm not done in terms of like, I'm going to be growing my career and being featured on more podcasts. But like,
I get the impression you're only just starting. Personally.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah, I am. You know, and that's where I got like a year ago. I'm like, okay, this is great and I can have more of it. But the thing is, what's happening inside of me, that is what needs to be healed. And then the story ends where we are now, which is the past year, just really going so deep in patterns and being like, okay, let's clean out the closet inside of me, the traumas, the patterns, the ways that I self-sabotage myself, the ways I talk to myself, and healing who I am as a person from the inside out, really making peace with that inner child that got neglected for basically my entire life. And that's where the next phase of the journey begins. It's not just helping people with their external story, but also helping them heal the story that they're telling themselves and the patterns they continuously engage in that keep them from being fully present in the amazing life they built.
Yeah, exactly. Before we segue into this next little part about patterns and stuff like that, I want to say something like in the majority of speaking gigs, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, is like when you really look at everything, it's so important to be aware of your patterns, because like relationships don't fail, people fail a relationship. Businesses don't fail, people fail the business. Do you know what I mean? Like a diet plan doesn't fail, the person fails the diet plan. It's like, what is within you that is allowing these things to keep cocking up? And the reason that I really wanted to get you on the show so much was to speak about patterns. Now, we had an amazing speaker on who's actually wrote a book about this called Jessin Patsy, who recently spoke. We did a big story episode with her and she was speaking about her patterns. And the reason I wanted to get you on, because we can go into so much depth of kind of like how to really acknowledge them, how to maybe forgive yourself within them, how to let go of them, how to break the cycles, and how to break the loops. So I'd love to open this conversation up now, because I'll be fully transparent. 7 years ago, I had a complete moment where I came to the realization, and similar to yourself, I was forced. The universe grabbed me by the scruff of my neck and made me go, look, you're the problem in every relationship. You're the problem in businesses. You're the problem in leadership. It's all you. And it really made me take a hard look at my life to the point where I was like, reset button. Everything stops. I disappear. And I did the whole travel thing. And what we were trying to say at the beginning of this show and through your story is, if you aren't listening to the signs and signals that are presenting themselves, things build up in every single area of life where they'll just get louder and louder and louder until you're forced to listen. And it's at that moment of pain where people usually act from. Similar to myself, all the signs were there for years that I was doing all the wrong actions in relationships, business, XYZ, but it took a complete meltdown before I was like, okay, I'm listening. I'm going to now change the course. So, Celinne, I'd love to speak to you. Like, when it comes down to breaking patterns, because there is no motherfucker out there who is at fault bar ourselves. It's all on our shoulders. How do we, as an audience, how do we become aware of our patterns? Because I think that is what we all need to start with this conversation on.
Yes. And I love that. I literally teach, in my program, I have a whole module just on this because it's such a freaking important thing, is the awareness of your own patterns. Well, first of all, for you to be aware of a pattern, you need to know where it comes from, right? And just be like, okay, what are we talking? Because some people are like, what the fuck are patterns? Or they're like, oh, I kind of get it, but what is it really? What's going on? And so it's important to look at trauma and how trauma works in the body and how our body stores emotion and in response to it accordingly. And so without going into the deep side, I'm going to abridge this because it's not the focus here. So, definitely feel free to look this up and Google it. And I'm happy to answer clarifying questions. But the short version is that, well, all of us, we all have trauma. We all do. And some of us have, we call it a big T trauma, which is like the really profound, like, abusive parent or huge car accident or sexual abuse, like that's big T trauma. And then you have little T trauma, which is that time when you were 3 and your like brother punched you in the face and you like didn't understand why, even though it didn't hurt that much, but you like have daddy or brother issues or old man issues ever since. So you have like the big T trauma and you have the T tree trauma. One thing is like, we all have it, whether we like it or not. And one of the things I most struggled with is I actually just denied the existence of, I'm like, I don't have trauma. I don't have it. I'm fine. And I did that for most of my life, which was the first thing to become aware of. I would say step 0.5 is just become aware that you have it. And so how does trauma work? So when you are faced with and in this, I'm not going to make the distinction about like, what trauma is the most worst. Like, I'm not going to go there here, but it's important to understand that trauma occurs when there is a very distressful, disturbing event that is happening and your body, your nervous system does not have the capacity to handle it. So for example, if you are 3 years old, and I'll use this as it's a client story. Like if you're 3 years old and a boy comes up to you in kindergarten and puts a fake knife into your throat and says, I'm going to kill you, that is a really alarming moment where your 3-year-old brain is like, I'm going to die. And regardless of what actually the accident is and how innocent it is, and boys will be boys, that is creating a sense of anxiety and real fear in your body, in your 3-year-old body, that you do not understand, and it's the first time you have it. And so your nervous system is like fight or flight, I'm going to die. And because you're a 3-year-old, you don't actually cognitively cannot process that, like, oh, this is a little boy, he's 3 and it's a plastic knife and he's just playing with me. Like that's not processed. And so what your body does is it stores that fear, that anxiety, and that emotion. It keeps it in your body. So the emotion is stored in your body and it saves it for later. This is very oversimplified, but all that emotion, because you do not know how to process it, it stays stuck in your body. And it will continue to stay stuck in your body until you process it. And here's the kicker. That can happen 30, 40, 50 years later.
Yep.
And so it will stay there until you process it. And here's the word part, is that until you process it, your body, your subconscious, will continue to look for opportunities to relive a moment where it can finally release that emotion. Now, what does this have to do with patterns, bringing it back? So you can all think of moments, whether it's little T trauma or big T trauma, which is much more difficult to unpack, because if you come from a history of years and years and years of abuse, that's like 18 years, 20 years compounded, or whatever many years it may be. So your body is storing this emotion, whether it's anger, fear, rage, and it's keeping it inside. And patterns come from essentially your cognitive mind trying to make sense of this emotion and creating a program to deal with it. And so, for example, let's say that I'll use a personal example, grew up with a very verbally abusive mother. And to me, that's 18 years of me storing that in, keeping it the every time I got angry, I'd have to keep it in. Every time I got pissed, I'd have to keep it in. Every time I got stressed. So my nervous system is shot, and I'm consistently living on high tone. And so there's a series of patterns that come from that. One pattern is, if I ever trust someone, they're going to betray me. Therefore, I need to be defensive. So then every time someone comes into my life that I label as I can trust this person, then the emotion, that stored emotion, is betrayal, fear. It's like, I can't trust this person. They will betray me. And therefore I come in with a bunch of defense mechanisms and push that person away and then destroy the relationship. And that will basically happen again and again and again and again and again, because in that pattern, I get to feel fear again. I get to feel angry again. I get to feel betrayal again, which is my body's way of being like, get this out of me. This is familiar. This is comfortable. Let me feel fear. Let me feel anger. But then because I'm not breaking the pattern, the motion doesn't complete. And so I have to find someone else to run that program through, and then someone else, and then someone else. And this is how we find ourselves in the same relationship over and over again that fails in very similar ways, and how we find ourselves making the same mistakes in business over and over again, or self-sabotaging our life over and over again. The classic one is you make money, then you feel the urge to spend it, and then you have no money, and then you have to overwork yourself so you can make more money, feel the urge to spend it, don't have money again, and now you have to overwork yourself. So we all have our own template of patterns, but the first step of becoming aware of them is understanding just the science behind it, which I've oversimplified here, but it's that emotions that are not completed get stuck in your body. So if you don't process the emotion, it will get stuck. And the work, or the personal work, is really being able to release as much as emotion that's stuck as you can, so that emotion isn't clouding your conscious vision of how you need to be acting. Because if I didn't have that anchor, that emotional anchor, and this is one of the big patterns I had to work through, then I would be like, oh, it's a person. Of course I can trust them. I wouldn't be thinking that they would be betraying me, because I wouldn't have all these emotions that are like, oh my God, person, they're going to betray. And so we have so many patterns, but when it becomes aware of patterns, the first thing for you to look at is, where are you most self-sabotaging yourself in your life right now? That's the first clue. It's, where in your life are you the least happy? And it could be that you keep attracting the same kind of guy that, I don't know, cheats on you, or you keep pulling in business partners that screw you over, or you keep saving money and then having to spend it because random expenses pop up out of nowhere. And so starting to analyze where are the areas in your life where you're really like, fuck, this is really frustrating and it feels like it's out of my control. The key here is that it feels it's out of my control. The good news, it's not. But it feels like it. And from there, so let's say it's the money thing. Like, I keep spending money that I don't have. And what's the pattern? Like, literally, what are the steps? If you were to write out a program for yourself, I earn it, I spend it, I don't have it, I work really hard, I overwork myself. What is the step-by-step pattern? So what's the thing that stops sabotaging you? What is the step-by-step pattern that is actually causing that? And once you have the pattern down, the next answer, which is going to be where it's the most challenging for most people, is understanding, where did this come from originally? Which is what most people don't want to do, because they think they can consciously hack their way out of it, which works somewhat.
It's like self-sabotage in the actual work of breaking down the self-sabotage. Like, it's like, no, we don't want to deal with that. We can leave that till tomorrow.
Yeah. But you know what's fucked up, Simon? We like our patterns. That's the human condition. We complain, we bitch about it, but then we re-engage in it because it gives us a hit of this is familiar and this is comfortable. Oh, I can't believe I like attracted another fuckboy into my life. Oh my God. But you love the drama. You love the stress. You love the talk, calling up your girls and like complaining about this. You're addicted to that feeling of suffering, to that feeling of anxiety, because it's familiar to you. Because if I were, this is something I work with my female clients all the time. If I were to actually drop the perfect man in front of you, who's going to treat you right, everything good for you, treat you exactly like you deserve, you either won't be attracted to him, or you'll find something that's wrong with him, or you'll do everything you can to prove him wrong, because that's what you're addicted to.
So let's go back and just kind of like reframe. So we're aware of the pattern, and then the fundamental moment of change is when do we get the choice to change?
Well, you get several choices. The first choice is, are you going to be aware of this or not? Because the actual act is the act of saying, for example, I keep fucking up in my relationships and it's my responsibility, is in itself an act of courage. Because what do we usually do? Oh, well, this person, well, he cheated on me. Or like, oh, well, she doesn't match, like she doesn't get along with my parents, or he does that. So it's like, that doesn't mean that that person's the right match for you, because if he cheated on you, then he cheated on you. If she doesn't get along with your parents, she doesn't get along with your parents. But why are you blaming this person for what went wrong in their relationship? And that's confronting. That's confronting as fuck. Yeah. Because sometimes someone is an asshole to you. It's true. Like we exist. We're out there. You know what I mean? And it's just like, we do it ourselves. And I say we because we also can unconsciously do things that hurt people. But the focus is on what they did wrong, or, oh, this client screwed me over. This person, this coach didn't teach me what I needed to learn. And where is a sense of self-responsibility of actually, why am I attracting this into my life? What's the pattern? So the first moment of choice is, this is my responsibility. I choose to look at the pattern. That's the first moment of choice, is I choose to look at the pattern and actually seeing the pattern and how it's playing out in your life. It's a very confronting process. The second choice is, I'm going to change this pattern.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I see it, and I'm not down with it. It needs to change. And by the way, this is just in the very beginning of subconscious reprogramming, Simon. And you're already faced with two very uncomfortable decisions, which in and of themselves, by nature, breaks the pattern. When you're aware of the pattern, you start to break the pattern, because that in itself is uncomfortable and shining light on your own suffering and your unwillingness to keep in that loop. So just these two are already powerful.
Sorry, I'm just replaying this into like old experiences. Do you feel that sometimes a lot of people actually have to be going through that pattern or currently in it before then they can? Because I'm just thinking back to when I was at my point of awareness was like well and truly through it. And I think the majority of people who I actually speak to it are somewhat in the shit in their current pattern before they actually then can change it. So it's like, we actually have to, do we actually have to be in that pattern to?
Well, according to like Tibetan monks, no, we don't. But, this is real life, and we're here, real people now meditating in the mountains. Technically, we choose to go through that cycle of suffering. And, this is, again, according to the books, we can choose to just stop it. But let's bring it back to ground, which is that this is part of life, is going through these patterns and identifying them, breaking them, and learning from them. And here's what I teach. This is what I teach my clients as well, because part of going and knowing your story, you say, oh, I want to tell my story. My story can change so many people. Okay, cool. But if your story is peppered with your shitty patterns, then when you tell your story, you're projecting that onto others, which isn't actually doing them much service. So when we look at your story, we actually look at these patterns. And when you actually look at these patterns, what you're going to see, and the big key takeaway, the good news, is that the more you're able to move through them, that's how you turn your pain into power. So the more you move through these painful experiences and you say, actually, no more, then you can turn that into your superpower. Because when you know how to break that pattern, then you can teach people how to do it as well. And this is why we pay people who have done it, and we're not going to pay someone who's like right in the middle with it, just like we are, and hasn't gotten to the other side of it yet.
I absolutely love this. I was literally having this conversation the other morning. I was like, the biggest thing I'm seeing in the coaching world at the minute, especially, I don't like to use, especially being here in Bali, but genuinely, especially being here in Bali, is you see a lot where people are coaching from the wound. They're not helping people from the scar. So they're currently still in their patterns, but trying to genuinely help people. And it's actually creating more harm than good. Instead of people actually making it all the way through, being like the fully blossomed version who's out of it fully, do you know what I mean? And then actually delivering it. I think this is why I fell so much in love with your work. It's because you have to complete the pattern and be completely away with it before you actually go out there and create the big impactful business. Otherwise, you'll just keep tripping yourself up. People can't relate to the story. You're not trustworthy. Your authenticity is all over the show. The language that you use is giving you away. It doesn't work. There's immediate disconnect.
Yes. And I'm glad you're touching on this, because that is actually one of the reasons why I'm motivated with my mission and the work that I do, is because if I can help as many leaders as I can, like visionaries, to teach from healed place. And because a lot of people, even some, clients, when they come to me, they're projecting, they're coming from a wounded place, and they're telling their story from that wounded place, which all it does is it reinforces that wound on more people and more people and more people. And when you actually heal the wound, then you can really truly show people, because what you heal from becomes your medicine. And you can share that and pass that on. So, and another thing I want to know, because some people might be like, well, I got a lifetime of wounds. Like, how am I ever then going to be qualified or good enough to teach others, which is another big limiting belief that people come to me with. And the thing is that, yes, look, we all have our wounds, we all have our patterns, and it's our lifetime work to evolve past them. However, it doesn't mean that you are not qualified to lead and help people right now. And I'm going to give a more concrete example. So if you're a relationship coach, I know you've probably seen it, or like a sex coach, whatever, and you have these unresolved like you were abused, you're like unresolved childhood traumas around your dad, your mom, whatever it may be, and you have not done the proper work to release the emotions, that still stuck emotions around that, and truly release the trauma. And now you're showing up and you're trying to teach people how to be in a relationship or how to have healthy, happy sex. All you're doing is basically trying to heal yourself by using your clients as a projection of what you need to be healed within yourself. And so how can you, for example, if you haven't healed an issue that you had around your dad abusing you and you haven't fully healed from that, and you're just telling yourself cognitively that you have, but you haven't done the somatic emotional work that's necessary to do that, then your reality of what love is shaped by how your father treat you. And now you're teaching someone else that reality by calling yourself the expert. And it's only natural. And again, like, for example, using this specifically, if you have that history, it's only natural that you're going to be either go in the route of like not ever having sex, or you're going to be over sexually active. So people are looking at you and you're oozing that sexual energy and they're like, oh my God, I want to learn how to like have lots of sex like you. And then you just project that. And so that's a big thing that I've seen so many times. And so, for example, if you have that unresolved wound and it's going to take you some time to work through it, that's fine. You work through it, but it might be that you are just absolutely fucking genius at handling money, and your money blueprint is on point because you were raised in like a very financially stable environment. You were taught to have a really healthy relationship with money, and you just get money. You know how to make it. You know how to teach people how to make it. Go do that. Like, you're healed there. Like, that to you is a place where you don't have triggers, where you don't have unhealed wounds that are just begging to be looked at. And so you can be a very successful business coach and still be working through the journey of healing a sexual abuse or other trauma, and still be very successful. And of course, the caveat here is that you're going to feel more fulfilled as you heal that wound. So you're still going to have a piece of you that's missing, perhaps in your relationships. And so the more you heal that, the more you can have healthy relationships and a thriving business. So it's not about getting to the point where you're perfect. or where all your patterns are fixed. It's about discerning and understanding, I've gone through this, and being so familiar with your story where you know I've healed from this, I can teach this, I have not healed from this, this is where the work is.
I love this because it ripples. Everything ripples into every area of life. And just then when I'm just listening to you talk, it's amazing how many of those things actually you actually see they start to ripple through into like the money. Usually when people have love issues, it usually affects their finances or money or XYZ. So it's just incredible. Like just as I'm hearing you talk, I'm just like connecting the dots in my head. I'm like, money, business, okay, love. They're the biggest issues I see. People who really struggle in that area, it crosses over to that aspect.
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting because a lot of the people that I work with, they're coming to, I mean, 90% of them are coming to me strictly to grow their business, get more visible, like grow their brand, and feel worthy of that. And you will be shocked how many times we sit and we're starting to talk, okay, well, what's missing? Oh, I'm not making the money I want to make, or I'm not being like, nobody's answering my pitches, or I'm not as visible as I want to. And when we break that down and we look at the patterns, you will be shocked how much of those patterns that are basically keeping them from having the business they want are actually patterns they're facing in their relationships right now, their personal relationships, and how much work we need to do around either like the person that they're dating or their friends or their shitty roommate, and actually solve the pattern there. And then when we dissolve it there, all of a sudden, boom, in their business, oh, I'm getting the clients I want. Or like, I'm attracting people that aren't toxic, you know? And it's like, well, yeah, that's because that's what you're doing in your personal life. It's just translating. When you're an entrepreneur, I find that business and love are like this. And the patterns are showing up in business, show up in your love life, in your business. It's amazing how connected it is.
That's incredible. I'd love to kind of speak to you about this as well. Like, because obviously the biggest issue I see in I think there's a lot of issues in the personal development world, the self-growth world, all that sort of stuff. And you're never really going to get to a position where you're perfect and you're away from these. Like, for example, you can do a lot of self-help, you can like do all the healing work and stuff like that. But things are going to happen in life. Things are going to come up again where those, do you know what I mean? The patterns opportunity will be given a voice maybe to arise again. But it's then in that moment where you can process and you can deal with it better. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Well, you have certain patterns. Like I said, you know, when you have like a little T trauma, like the example of like you were 3, and this thing happened, you can actually dissolve the charge around that really quickly. That's something like breath work.
I love the word dissolve. I think that perfectly sums it up. It's perfect.
In breath work, we call it a single point trauma, which is something where your body can actually somatically work through in just like one session, one go. But then you have more complex big T traumas, like years and years of abuse that is going to create an army of patterns. And the work is to really start to identify these patterns as they pop up and to lessen the charge. Because sometimes, you know, I know like I said, I'm simplifying it, because you can say, oh, well, you know, that one time I can't trust people because of that one time when I was 5, my mom did this. But the truth is, it's actually like years and years and years of this being reinforced over and over again. So even if I do a breathwork session and go back to that one point and release it, it's going to lower the charge. But what about all the other times where this was reinforced, right? And so it's not as simple as being like, let me just go there, dissolve it, and everything's good. So, but the thing is the awareness. When my clients come to me, for example, if they were paying me to just like be like, oh, I want to dissolve this one pattern, and then like that's it, I wouldn't even want to take their money, because it's like, okay, cool, like you have tons of patterns that are actually playing out, and like for me to solve one problem, one pattern is actually not going to help you that much, because great, you have this area of your life, but then other things are going to pop up. So what you want to do is be learning how to break patterns better, and learning how to do it so well that it starts to become an automatic, like a habit. Because we're in the habit of self-sabotaging yourself. You got to flip that habit so that you're in the habit of being like, ooh, there's a pattern. Ooh, that's not good. I need to rewire this. I have a tool set of how I can emotionally process this. And I have my beautiful cognitive mind to design a new pattern. And so you do that one time, and it's the hardest fucking thing in the world. You do it twice, you do it 3 times, you do it a couple hundred times, and all of a sudden you're catching them and you're just like, ooh, Gotta do that. Flip it around. Oops, don't like that. Flip it around. And you start doing that.
I love the analogy of this, which is like when you really think about it, like if you can kind of like put a really simple analogy to what we're on about. If you think of like a freshly snow covered hill and you take a sledge, do you know what I mean, through the whole of your life. And if you think the sledge is your thoughts, so effectively what happens if you go down on your sledge, you can kind of choose where you go, you're free. But over time, over weeks, over months, effectively that sledge creates deep grooves. So no matter whereabouts on that hill you go down, you're always going to fall into one of those grooves. And the thing I love about this is like the more of the work that you do on yourself, it's like you're resetting the snow so that you're more in control of where you can navigate the sledge and you're not falling into those deep ingrained ruts. And like the thing that I love about this, and more to the point with you, is we're speaking about this topic. And if I think back to my own story when all of this was going on, I kind of was like, look, something needs to change here. I tried pretty much everything, cold therapies, X, Y, Z, you get the drift. But the one thing that I found was the biggest tool for me was breath work. And we've had quite a lot of breathwork experts on, but never someone in your remit where we can speak about patterns, we can speak about trauma, but then also kind of connect this directly back through to why breathwork actually is one of the best modalities to actually go in there, allow yourself to present the traumas and the problems and work your way through them. So yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that, because I really feel with your skill set and remit, you've actually got the full toolkit.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, one of the things that I noticed, I started off doing neurolinguistic programming, which is a really powerful modality. But what I found is that it wasn't really getting me. It was helping me help my client like redesign their mindset and rewrite the pattern consciously, being like, no, I don't want to do this. I want to do this. And be like, here's a habit that I'm indulging in. Let's change the habit. So it helps in terms of changing your habits, changing the way that you operate. But it's very much a top-down approach, exactly, where you're trying to influence that deep-rooted emotion that is like beyond your conscious mind. And it's really important to know that your emotions live in a different part of your brain, and your emotions do not have the capacity for language. So your emotions live in the limbic brain, which is like the reptilian, like it's the first brain that we developed. And it's raw, it's gut decisions. It's that, oh, I just had a gut feeling, I made decisions from this. So actually our emotions live from this really raw place that determine most of our decisions, which we don't cognitively like to admit, because our beautiful neocortex, that front part of your brain, we're going to call it the conscious brain, is the one that has the capacity for language and basically explains, makes logic, rationalizes everything. And so a lot of people, they intellectualize their traumas, they intellectualize their patterns. And you're saying, oh, well, I know that I have this really bad relationship because I have daddy issues, and I have this thing happen when I was young, and that thing that happened when I was young, and that thing happened. And, I know that I have a hard time getting along with women, but that's because my mom did this, this, and that. And you can intellectualize it all day long, and it won't move the needle much, which is why talk therapy has some serious downfalls, and why you might need to go to therapy for years and years and years before you get something resolved. Or, because they both help in their own way. Breathwork is a modality that gets rid of the story, which is like the intellectual, like blah, blah, blah. Well, I have this issue because of that issue, because of that, and gets right into your body. You get right into your subconscious mind. And through breathwork, the breath will bring up whatever is the stuck emotion in your body, like whatever is let's say, like when you think of your subconscious as like under the iceberg, whatever is like closest to the top that like needs to come out and be processed. And it will allow you to somatically process that emotion so that your nervous system can get the hit of like, wow, this emotion is processed. This is done. Check. Let me give this emotion to the conscious brain so that they can file it as this is a thing of the past, because your subconscious mind does not understand time. So everything is happening right now. So all the traumas, all the emotions that are happening, they're happening in your subconscious right now. So breathwork is like, okay, that one time when I was 3 and that kid put a plastic knife to my throat, that was scary. Let me live out that fear. My body will live out that fear right now in 2 minutes or less. Boom, that fear is processed. The charge is released. This is a thing that happened in my past, and it stops having a grip on you. And that naturally influences the way that you show up. And so the reason why I actually love marrying this modality with the work that I do now is because subconsciously and somatically, we're releasing these traumas. We're allowing this energy to process and move in a way that isn't just like you talking about it one day and feeling better. Like, this is permanent.
And then it comes back because the thorn's not been pulled out of the skin.
Yeah, exactly.
And there we go again.
The thorn out of the skin. And now that it's out, and that emotional, that it's like, think of it like the emotion keep pulling you underwater. And it's like, how can you swim to the shore when you have this emotion that just keeps pulling you under? So now there's nothing pulling you under. So now you have the freedom to swim to the shore and do whatever it is that you want to be doing next, which is where your conscious mind kicks in. This is where we use, modalities, again, NLP, hypnotherapy, coaching. And you bring people to be like, okay, how do you rewrite the story? How do you rescript this? And this time the rescript will stick because the emotional anchor is gone. So breathwork is magical. I can talk about it all day long.
I really do. The amount of shows and experts who we've had on, like, for me, like, I thought I was going out my head, and breathwork was the one thing that I left there, and I, for the first time, felt at peace. I felt like I'd got through what I needed to. And the amount of people who I've taken there, like, a lot of my friends are big lads, they're just very closed people. But like, when I've taken people there, they're like, wow, I needed that. And it's incredible. I really just like wish people would be more open to try these new modalities that are coming. And I think there's a lot of talk now around psychedelics and a lot of these different, like, other medicinal ways of getting there. But breathwork, you can pretty much get to that level if you just allow yourself to just settle in and let it guide you.
I have had some breathwork sessions that are comparable to psychedelics. Like, it's really, especially for people who, with psychedelics, I'm a huge fan of them. I'll be transparent. But the downside to that is that it's almost like you're accelerating. You're almost like forcing that subconscious open. And so sometimes if you essentially take too many psychedelics and you don't have the capacity built to process what's going to bubble up, it could mess you up. And so, the idea with responsible psychedelic use is that you're taking in dosages that are actually like matching more or less what you need to be processing and bringing through. But sometimes you just don't know.
Straight for the hero dose.
Yeah, I'm not a psychedelic expert, but I know, like, it's like you're taking that hero's dose and you're bringing shit up. It might take you like a full-on year or two for you to work through that thing that you like opened up. And with breathwork, it's like your body's not going to give you more than you can handle, than you can physically process, because it knows this is body intelligence at its finest. It's going to release the pain that it knows that it can process, and you have to trust that it knows how to do it. And one of the things my teacher always tells me is that 100% of the times you always make it through. And it's true. And so you release that. And, the thing is, like, people are so scared of like, well, I don't want to feel the rage. I don't want to feel the fear. I don't want to feel the pain. It actually takes 2 minutes for the actual emotion to process fully in your body, and everything else is story. So sometimes when I'm facilitating, we have to facilitate people out of what we call looping, which is they will process like rage or a really angry moment in their life. And then they will continue, once they actually process it, their conscious mind will continue to replay that story and continue crying. But like crying about the story, but not the actual emotion. Does that make sense? Like the emotion is processed. Now you're just torturing yourself. You're just creating unnecessary suffering, which is what stories can do when we don't own them or get in driver's seats of them.
Yeah. Well, this has been an absolutely incredible conversation. There's so much more I could go jump down into this. I'd love to, if you could give one piece of advice. So say, for example, now there's a hell of a lot of listeners that listen to the show. If you could put a message out there for people who might know they're in a pattern, who currently do know that self-sabotage or they keep getting in their own way. And like, is there a resource or is there something that you could like a message or somewhere where you could send people where they could kind of get like some immediate help, go to, or something that they could do that could immediately help them?
Yeah, this is a surprise, but I actually do have a resource. I'd be happy with your audience. I actually realized I have a training on what the key principles are. One of them, because patterns is actually one of the 4 things that are subconsciously holding you back and getting in your way. There's patterns, there's stories, there's self-management of your energy, and there's also beliefs. So I'd actually be happy for people who are like, okay, I need to know more about this, to share this training with your audience for free. And I have a little PDF that comes along with it as well. So I'd be happy to share
send it over. We can put it into the show notes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
So obviously there you just opened up that conversation to something I'm not going to miss whilst you're here. So those 4 things again were what that hold people back and keep them in their own way?
It was a surprise. So I'm like, I have a freebie, but I actually think based on what we talked about, this training that I did is going to be more helpful to your people. I call it the 4 key principles to inner magnetism. And it's basically the 4 things that either make you magnetic or hold you back. And it's patterns, stories, self-management, or beliefs.
That's incredible. So if we just kind of go over those, like the self-management, is that boundaries?
Yeah. And it's also energy. So patterns are, I can quickly kind of run you through it. I'll start with beliefs. It's the most simple and it's the easiest one to understand, which is, what do you believe in? And you have limiting beliefs and we have empowering beliefs. So that's the first thing that really gets us. The second thing is self-management, which is how you manage your energy and your state. So basically it would be like, if it's in morning time and you spill your coffee and then you trip over, are you going to let that ruin your entire day? Or do you have the ability to manage that state so you can get back into high performing state right away? So self-management is the other one. Patterns is what we just talked about, which is basically a cluster of behaviors. So it's going to be a mix of beliefs and behaviors and habits that you develop that basically create this like mega.
It's a clusterfuck.
It's a clusterfuck. Yeah. And then you have stories with a lowercase s, because we were talking about your story with a capital S, and we have stories, which is because a pattern is a clusterfuck of habits and things that you do and beliefs, as we just discussed. Stories are, what are the stories that you're telling yourself? So, for example, the pattern around the money example is, I'm going to make a lot of money, I'm going to spend it all, and then I'm going to be broke, and then I'm going to overwork. So that's the pattern. There's no story to that. But the story would be, well, when I was young, my father would work really hard, and then he would spend all his money, and therefore I turned out this way because I was taught. That's the actual narrative, which involves places, people, and events that you create that basically really anchors in the pattern. And so stories are what I work on primarily to help flip that into an empowering story that is actually serving you. So those are the 4 key principles to inner magnetism, depending on how you see it, because if you master them, inner magnetism. If you fall victim to them, it's self-sabotage.
Oh, hell yeah. I was going to say, it's like, when I really think about it, the thing that I love about psychology and these sorts of topics, it's like, we've been given this incredible machine and we have no handbook or how any like guidance system through school or any education as we grow up of how to use this incredible system that we've got, which is our brain, our thought process. It's madness.
We don't know how to human, but we're learning.
Well, yeah, always human doing and never human being.
That's the journey. And that's really the beauty of it. And what I realize with this work, especially people who are complete self-development junkies and they're just trying to like fix because that's where the line is. You know what I mean? It's that line of like, do I need to fix myself or just heal these parts of myself that are getting in my way right now? And then something else will pop up and then I heal that too. No problem. So it's not like a thing where you just got to get it all done right now. It's learning how to do it better so that in the future, like right now, breaking your pattern might be the ultimate pain in the ass. But if you make it a habit to be someone who consistently is aware of and willing to release patterns, then a year from now, you're breaking them like on the daily, and it's not even a thing that's costing you that much energy because it's just a habit. It's part of who you are. And that's just a better way to live life because it's less stressful.
Yeah, I love the fact you just use the term self-development junkies. I genuinely see that so much. And it's like, if you're always going in search of something, you're always going to find it, and I think you can go, it's very easy to kind of fall into one of the biases. It's like you're always consuming material and trying to find what's wrong with you and you're stuck here, but you're actually using this as a crutch not to go out there, create and do.
Yeah.
And that's another big topic of conversation there. I love the term self-development junkies. It's so true.
It's a thing, but you got to ground in, it's a balance. It's like, you have to have the be, you have to do the do. And that's a struggle, especially with a lot of us, especially Western society. We are, myself included, we are in the do. And part of the work, even with modalities such as breath work and this work of healing, is to heal our nervous system. When I say, everybody's like, heal ourselves, like I get that that's like so overused, but what we're actually doing is healing our nervous system so that it's operating balanced where it's meant to be, where our body designed us to be for as long as possible, instead of being extremely high tone, which is basically most of Western society right now.
I totally get that. I also think there's no excuse. I think being a human doing, so for example, an hour of breath work once a week is enough. I think a lot of people are there like doing all of these crazy practices, tapping, telling themselves I love you for half an hour in the mirror, journaling for 6 hours. Like, find the one thing that's really going to crack the shell to get you moving forwards,
For sure.
Yeah. So, Celine, look, we always round up the show with a couple of questions. And I love to know this because you have an amazing story, which is, if you could think back to a moment in time, be it when you were a young child, a happiest moment that you can think of, and you could walk back into that story and you could see the little Celine either playing on a swing or doing whatever she's doing in complete flow. And you could walk over to her and you could literally kneel down. You could look her in the eye, grab her by the hands, and give her one piece of advice to set her up for the future. What piece of advice would you give her?
It's interesting because the one that popped up instantly in my mind is not like the one that I guess if I had to think about it and give you like the coach answer I would give you.
I want the intuitive
one. It's actually quite simple. I would tell her to keep writing.
Oh, amazing. So when's the book going to be out?
Good question. I'm 200 plus pages in, so the material's definitely there. I would say 70%, and I'm chipping away at it, and I am keeping writing, but hopefully more in the future.
I can't wait to read it.
Always felt like part of my dharma. Since I was a little girl, that's all I've loved to do. The first thing I've done creatively is write, and in many ways I allowed myself to stop out of fear of self-expression, and keep writing to me is keep self-expressing, keep telling the truth, keep opening up, keep not being afraid of what others will say. So in those two words, there's so much meaning that's packed for me as to being someone who can show up and share herself, share her story from a place of completely owning it. And that to me is what keep writing is. So that's for whatever that looks like for you, of keep writing, keep showing up and sharing your voice, and just sharing who you are, no matter who's hating on you.
I was going to bring this up when you were talking about your story, but I always find when people hit that universal slam, it kind of like just realigns you back to the core values of you. It's like, you know what? I love to travel and explore. I love to create and write. I love to connect with new people. And I think if you just follow suit of those intuitive things that you love doing and bring you out the most, you're already on the right path.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And final question before we round this up is, to you, Celine, what does it mean to you to be able to lead a nourished life?
Ooh, that is a question. That is a yummy question. I might use it. A nourished life. Well, the first thing that popped into my mind was nourishing my soul. And I know that's a little vague, so I will elaborate. There's obviously many things that I desire, as we've spoken about, externally in my physical world. I want to have a thriving business. I want to get my clients amazing results. I want to build up a lot of wealth and have properties. And there's an external life that I would like to have in this lifetime and create, and having that material physical abundance. But to me, when you say nourishing my life, it really goes back to what we've been talking about this entire time, which is I want how I feel about myself and who I am inside to feel absolutely worthy and more of everything that is being built externally. And that, to me, that is a nourishing life. It's that alignment between I'm building whatever I want, I fucking have it because I like having what I want, and I feel worthy of it. And when I talk to myself and when I live in the shell, this meat suit of me, I'm happy with who I am and what I've created. And I'm not just saying that, having it come out of my mouth, but I actually feel that unshakably in my body. So it's really giving my soul what it needs and never losing sight of the inner world that I've built, and coupling that and matching that with the beautiful external world as well.
Celinne, that was beautifully put. Look, I want to acknowledge you. I think you've got an absolutely incredible story, and how it's gone from where it was. Obviously, you had the courage and the bravery in yourself to go on this amazing adventure, which has kind of turned you into this perfect storyteller. I see the work that you are doing as invaluable to entrepreneurs. I get to work with a lot of brand leaders, businesses, XYZ, you name it, people in the corporate sectors. And I really feel that the work that you do really brings people true from the inside out, so that their outside world can amplify as their inside world amplifies along with it as well. So I think everything you're doing is incredible. And like I said, I really think I think there's a very big future ahead of you. I really can't wait to watch that unfold.
I have to say, I agree.
Can't wait.